Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Peace's guest speaker series. And today's guest is from Homewood Health, and they administer the Law Society of Ontario's Member Assistance Program. So thank you so much, Doron, for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, John Paul. It's nice to be back. It's nice to be back talking to the paralegal students, which is such an important part of our profession these days. And the type of issues that you guys are dealing with are in some ways unique in terms of what paralegal students and eventually paralegals go through. And some of them are very similar to what law students and lawyers go through. It's one profession, and you are the regulated part of that profession, the licensed part of that profession, or you're going to be. And so, what I'm going to try to do as best I can is share with you some of the things that I see as someone who works with people in the profession, including students, some of the challenges that you might face, as well as some of the resources that you have access to as a result of your being paralegal students. My background is that before I was doing the work I'm doing now, I was a lawyer and I practiced law from about 1996 until about 2006. Was a family lawyer primarily. And then from then on, I worked forward to uh, uh, moving into personal coaching and then eventually became a psychotherapist, got a master's of social work. And I've been working in the field of lawyer assistance since I left law back in 2006. It's now 15 years, actually. Lawyer assistance and paralegal assistance is basically um, organizations, first the previous program and now the program I work with in Homewood Health, called the Member Assistance Program. These are organizations that are designed for paralegal students, law students, lawyers and paralegals, judges too, to assist them with challenges they have working in this profession. And there are challenges working in this profession. I sort of jokingly have called some of my talks in the last year, if you thought being a legal professional was hard, try doing it during a pandemic. There are challenges in our practice even before any of this happened. And this just added a lot of challenges. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that it added. But because I have that experience in the legal profession, first practicing and then working with paralegals and lawyers over the course of these years, I can speak a little bit to what we see on a regular basis. The purpose of this, in some ways, is to normalize your experience. One of the things that we do, people in our profession, is we sort of personalize our experiences. Whatever we're going through, we think is just us. Uh, you get into paralegal school, you sit in a class, you look around at your classmates, and you're like, there's some smart people here. There's some people who have done a lot of other things, had other professions and careers before they ever got here. And who am I? Especially if it's like the first thing you've ever done professionally, you might be intimidated. You might feel a little bit over your head. You might feel like an imposter. And that concept, the concept of being an imposter, sometimes called imposter syndrome, is very, very relevant to students. Law students experience it as well. Paralegal students experience it. It's basically just, I'm in this room full of people, or I'm on this Zoom class full of people in this case. Everyone's so smart. Everyone's so well spoken. Everyone has so much to say and they've had so much experience in life. I'm afraid to say something. I don't want to sound stupid. I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't want to embarrass myself. What's interesting for people is those smart people or those seemingly smart people are often people who also feel like imposters. They often feel just as out of place as you might feel. And they may look at you and think, wow, that person's really smart. That was a really smart comment they made. So, because we're all in our little silos and we're all experiencing the experience of paralegal school and then practice in our own experience, in our own bubble, and because we're often not talking to anyone else about what it's like or our own vulnerability or our own insecurity, we can often feel like it's just me. It's a class full of, you know, really, really smart people and me. It's a class full of really, really accomplished and pulled together people, and then there's just me. That's an example of imposter syndrome. And when I say it affects people in our profession at every level, I mean it. About a year and a half ago, at the commencement, at the graduation for the University of Toronto Law School, Justice Moldaver of the Supreme Court of Canada, highest court in Canada, was given an honorary doctorate, and he spoke. And when he spoke about how sometimes, as a man in his 70s, he feels like he's not qualified to do the job. Now, mind you, this is a justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. You don't get higher. And yet he still had that insecurity. I know my mom, as a very admired school principal for many, many years before she retired, she was granted an honorary doctorate herself for her work in education. And yet, until she retired at around age 60, she believed that they were going to walk into her office at any moment and say, "We just realized you have no idea what you're doing. Get out." That's imposter syndrome. That's feeling unqualified and like you don't fit, like you don't belong, even though there's no reason to believe that objectively. There's no reason based on your hard work and intelligence and things you've done in your life and your character and your integrity. There's no reason to believe you can't handle it. But we feel inside of us like we can't handle it. And that can really wear us down, can really, really isolate us. Because if we're feeling that kind of out of place, one of the things that happens is smart people often have that world inside their head. They take that information and spin it out into really bad outcomes, and they isolate themselves so that they don't share it with anyone because they're embarrassed. They think it's a personal failing. They think it's a character flaw that they have. So why would I tell anyone about my struggles if all they're going to do is just judge me? And because I'm projecting my self judgment onto them. What really happens is when people are feeling vulnerable and they talk to someone who is compassionate and kind, what they generally get back is compassion and kindness. But they don't expect that because they're looking through it with the lens of, I look at myself this way, I see myself as failing or whatever, and everyone else will too. So I'm not going to talk to anyone about that. So that isolation actually feeds itself. It actually, the isolation feeds the insecurity, which feeds the isolation. And we go deeper and deeper into this sense of failure. It can affect your mood. It can affect your mental health in ways that cause depression. Because if you're feeling isolated, alone, and hopeless, and in some ways self judging or even self hating, and you're not talking to anyone about it, you're just going to sit in that. That's your truth. If you feel like a failure and you're not talking to anybody else who grounds you in reality, then you're a failure because you're telling yourself that, and that's your truth. And you're not getting any kind of perspective from anyone else. That's why we always talk about how say it out loud to somebody. You guys are lucky. You know, in this class, you got a guy like John Paul who's so kind, who really cares, that I think you probably feel safe to contact him if you were feeling out of sorts. Not everyone feels like they have that. And even if you have it in this case, you may be hesitant to do it anyway. A lot of law students often say, I don't want to reach out for help because I don't want it to end up on my record. As though there's some record somewhere that that law firms or government offices check to see if you ever asked a teacher for help for a deferral of an exam or something. That record doesn't exist. Most outreach for support is confidential anyway. Outreach to our program, which I'll get into in a few minutes, is confidential. But I say all of this because the pressures that we're carrying right now are enormous. You guys are often carrying debt from school. You're carrying the pressure to just perform and get things done and pass and then find work and then do the work well, even though you've never done that work before. You know, I just spoke to a lawyer yesterday who's had a few years of experience already, and yet she still feels often um, like she doesn't know what she's doing. And is she ever going to know what she's doing? And part of what we decided was let the learning process unfold. Let yourself know that you don't know much at this stage of your career, that the people you work for know you don't know much at this stage of your career. They hired a new person that they know is going to have to learn, and that learning process unfolds and grows. And the more you learn, the more you know, the more confident you get. But that takes time. For those of you who drive a car, the first time you ever drove a car, I suspect, was really scary. You may not have even known how to start the car. You may not have even known what to do when you put it in reverse. My 17-year-old son is now learning how to drive, and backing up is scaring him to death, and he's actually pretty good at driving. But everything is hard, everything is new, everything feels big. Parallel parking is really hard. Making a left turn at a busy intersection. When should I go? Should I go? No, shouldn't I go? It's all scary. It all feels big. But for those of you who've driven for a while, when was the last time you thought about how to make a left turn? You don't. Sometimes you get in your car and you just arrive somewhere and you have no idea how you got there, because driving is so unconscious at this point that your experience has led you to not worry about that anymore. But if you remember what it was like when you started driving, every little thing. How far should I push the turn signal button for it to engage? I mean, every tiny little thing felt big. That's the same way with practice. That's the same way with law. You're going to start out thinking everything you're doing is big, everything you're doing is irretrievable. And if you make a mistake, it's never fixable. And the truth is, in law, most things are fixable. And the joke in litigation law is everything is fixable but a missed limitation period. Other than limitation periods, you can fix anything else. You can heal any other problem. But when you carry that pressure and that feeling like uh, you're not knowledgeable enough, it can really wear you down. So that kind of newness pressure hits you, and there are pressures around uh, Black and Indigenous people, people of color, Asian people, who are, by virtue of the systemic discrimination that exists in our society, facing additional barriers, facing additional challenges. That the old saying about how a person of color often has to work double as hard to get half the outcome. With people carry that with them, it actually has an impact on their mental health. It's a weight they carry on their back everywhere they go. Every job interview they go into, there's this sense of otherness. Am I noticed for who I am, or am I noticed because I look different than the other people in the office? That's an additional weight that a person carries. So that also has to be noticed, attended to. You need support. Often it's really helpful to join groups that are similarly situated. Black Law Students Association is a great organization. I'm sure the paralegal organization also has subgroups. Women's Law Association. Goodness knows women have very particular kinds of challenges in the legal profession, challenges related to being denigrated or thought less of. Or there's a couple of women on Twitter who've recently been talking about the way they're talked to by colleagues or by judges, that a man would never be talked to like that. And it's absolutely true. They're not imagining it. It's not like they're being overwrought. They have to deal with that every day. I'm not sure I could have handled it if I was in that position. So, and by the way, I mentioned Twitter. My Twitter handle is right there. You're welcome to check it out. I mostly post legal professional wellness stuff, the occasional puppy dog, things like that. But there's a community there. Even on Twitter, there's a law Twitter community of people who support each other, people who listen, who are quite non-judgmental. It's actually, interestingly enough, you think of social media as the Wild West. It's a really supportive group of people in the legal profession on Twitter. People who remind each other, check in on your students, check in on your paralegals to see how they're doing during COVID. So finding your group, finding your place of people who understand, who've been there, can be really helpful. And I do want to spend a couple minutes on COVID itself, because that very thing has made it even harder. Working from home. None of you is in a classroom with me. Last time I did a talk for John Paul, I was in a classroom at Trios with the students, with John Paul. It was different. Now you're sitting in a room looking at a screen you've been looking at every day for 13 months. That has an impact on a person. There are studies. Stanford just came out with a study about the impact of not Zoom fatigue per se, but just the impact of remote engagement. Looking at yourself, I'm looking at me while I talk to you. What does that do to a person? How does the brain assimilate that information? How does it assimilate that if you're doing it for 6 hours in a row with the occasional break? How does it impact you looking at a bunch of other people if like a Zoom call and there's a whole bunch of people there and you're looking at them in ways you wouldn't look at them if you were in a room with them? If we were in a classroom right now, you'd all be in rows facing towards me. You'd maybe see the back of the heads of most people. In this case, you'd all see each other, every little nuance. All of those things, just sitting in a chair for hours on end instead of moving from classroom to classroom, all that is having an impact. The impact of the virus itself and our concern for our kids. I sent my 6-year-old daughter to school today after a 2-week holiday break. And my wife and I debated it last night quite agonizingly because with everything else going on in the world, we weren't sure it was a good idea. But the school was open and public health officials said, yeah, it's safe. We have cohorts and we have masking and we have plexiglass. And yet, I just got a notification from my daughter's school 5 minutes before I came on that said, tomorrow they're closing. It's all going to be virtual again. This is what COVID is doing to us. It is yanking us around. It's making us concerned about our children's safety and health. I never imagined I would be worrying about that for her at this age. I'm sure you don't either for your kids. Never imagined I'd have to do this job while my daughter will be doing grade 1 downstairs tomorrow. How am I going to juggle that? And my wife is working in another place, so I'm here with her, and I'm trying to do my job, and I'm in my home. So what is home and what is work? How do you go from preparing for an exam to relaxing and watching Netflix in the same room for some people in an apartment where you do the work in that room and then you go 5 steps away and you watch Netflix? How do you ever turn off work in a situation like that? How do you keep your boundaries? How do you stay productive and focused when it's all mushed together? And by the way, the fridge is over there and the liquor cabinet is over there. Temptation is around, distraction is around, fatigue is around. That may be the biggest thing that I'm seeing now in the work that I do. People are tired. This has been a hard 13 months. It's wearing on us. It was okay April, May, June, we were in survival mode, right? We just marshaled our resources and we moved forward. And then we thought 2020 is almost over. 2021 will be better. But then 2021 came and it was kind of like 2020. But the vaccines are here, so that'll be good. Oh, but they're taking a long time to roll out. But soon they'll come. Oh no, variants. But we're getting pulled, pushed. New lockdowns. Is it a lockdown? Is it a half lockdown? These things are taking a toll on us. People are angry. People are tired and burned out. People are feeling a little helpless. All these things are natural, healthy responses to a difficult circumstance. I just had this talk with a young man today, a lawyer. He's been a lawyer a couple of years, and he was talking about how he's stressed out all the time. Is it COVID? His partner works outside of the home, and now the variants are here, and he's anxious about it. And should I have tools to deal with my anxiety? Well, there's things you can do to mitigate your anxiety. There's tools you can use to center yourself, ground yourself. But this is a legitimate thing to be anxious about. Something's happening in the world right now. It's okay for you not to be okay right now. Let yourself not be okay. Let yourself reach out to the people who support you, support other people. Be kind to them and be kind to you. Everything you do around yourself, you should do through the lens of kindness. Because a lot of us in the legal profession are tough on ourselves. We think we have to beat ourselves up to get performance out of ourselves. This is not the time to do that. I would argue it's never the time to do that, but particularly not now. You got to gently shepherd yourself through this period of time. You're doing the best you can. And that actually dovetails well with what I wanted to say about the resources that you have available to us, because the support exists. We as a program, the Member Assistance Program, is a program funded by the Law Society of Ontario to provide services to you. From the moment you got into paralegal school, you were entitled to use this program for free. And you will be able to use this program for free for the rest of your career and afterwards, after you retire. It's confidential. And I emphasize confidential because when you're regulated by an entity like the Law Society, you want to make sure that they don't hear bad things about you. The truth is, they're actually a pretty compassionate place. But when we feel regulated, like paralegals are, there's this sense of I got to maintain my reputation. I can't let them know that I have depression or whatever. That's not an issue. But even if you worried about that, um, you they wouldn't find out from us. They provide us funding to provide this service to you, but they don't know who calls us and they never will. There's an entire structure built where we don't even talk to the Law Society directly, except for a once a year meeting where we give them general statistics. No personal information is ever provided. There's a company we talk to them through so that uh, we don't even have direct conversations with the Law Society, so as to show you that it really is an authentically private program. It is confidential. It involves us and you, and no one else knows that you and I are talking, or you and one of the other people in our company are talking. So what do we offer? Um, we offer counseling with psychotherapists like myself. There are two lawyers turned therapists in our program, myself and Alicia Davies. So we got two legal professionals who both worked in the legal profession before we became counselors. And you could ask for one of us if you want, if it was relevant to you to speak to someone who's understood the process. Truth is, most people don't need a person who understands law per se. If you're having issues in your relationship and you want to get couples counseling, you don't need a former lawyer to talk to you about that. If you're even having career issues and you're just not sure what you're doing or what you want to do, it doesn't have to be a former lawyer you talk to. We have a roster of people across the province, very experienced psychologists, social workers, and once COVID is over, we're likely going to go back to including face-to-face counseling again, which we did before all of this. And what you do in counseling is you sit with someone like me. We create this space that is entirely about you and for you. It is a non-judgmental space. It is a place for you to just talk about what's happening in your life, how you're feeling, what's occurring, what's hard. And in that space, no one's going to be hard on you or judge you because it's all about validation and support. It's all about listening and empathy. And in that kind of space, you can actually feel a kind of thawing out of your own self judgment too. Because if you may have been hesitant to talk about it because you thought you'd be judged, and then someone is really nice to you about it and says, wow, that sounds really, really difficult. You must be really strong for being able to handle that. That can be really surprising for people have someone be kind to them when they're not being kind to themselves about it. We spend 50 minutes a session talking. You do most of the talking and you just talk about what's going on in your life and how you feel about it and what relationships you're having and how they're impacting you and what your habits are and what it's like at work and what your workload is like and the impact it's having or what it's like, what you're dealing with around raising kids or what your challenges are during COVID. Like I said, I discussed with a client earlier today. It's about life, all parts of your life, the legal part of your life, the personal part of your life, the relationship part of your life, the physical health part of your life. It can involve talking about things like depression or anxiety. A lot of people talking about anxiety these days. It can involve conditions like bipolar disorder, addictions, alcohol, drugs, gambling, online addictions. All of these things are worthy of support. None of them are character flaws, and none of them are deserving of judgment. You're doing the best you can, and we're here to help you make it a little better, more tolerable, to feel supported so you're not alone. So you don't, like I said, go into your head and just be alone with it. It's nobody should be alone when they're having a hard time. We're creatures of attachment. We need to connect with other people. We need to feel like other people get us. Counseling is for that purpose. It's for having someone get you, validate you, and help you find a way to make things better for yourself. So that's one example of what we do. We do it by video call. We can do it by phone. At some point, we'll go back to doing it face to face as well. We also have something that paralegals can access called the peer support program. We have paralegals and lawyers who have been through their own life challenges, who've been through addictions, who've been through depression, who've been through challenges going through a legal career, and they've offered themselves, having gone through their challenges and stabilized their own lives and gotten to a better place, come back to us and said, I'd like to help a colleague. I'd like to be someone they can talk to who understands, because not only am I also a paralegal, but I'm a paralegal who, let's say, had trouble with alcohol for a number of years. So I can speak to a paralegal who thinks they're drinking too much and they need support because it's really getting away from them. I get it. We would match them by the issue, let's say alcohol or anxiety or trauma. We would match them with a person who has been through that themselves. We would match them by gender, by LGBTQ status, by culture, by visible minority status, by geography, where they are, religion, whatever affinities, whatever makes you feel comfortable that you're sitting across from a peer, someone who has similar lived experience, who's like you, including having gone through some of the challenges that you're now going through, and come out the other side in a better place. They offer you A, compassion, which you may not be expecting, and B, an example of someone who's been through something similar and things have gotten better. So there's hope in it too. To get that, all you have to do is call our line and ask for peer support. You can ask for counseling, you can ask for peer support, you can ask for both. They're different things. One's professional counseling, and one is paralegals and lawyers who are there to listen and talk to. Different things. I should also mention we got a whole bunch of other resources that are available, um, like nutritional counseling and new parent support and elder care advice, financial counseling, even legal advice. Frankly, it's an employee assistance program like any other. It's just it's for the entire legal profession, including, as I said, paralegal students and paralegals. So what I invite you to do is, if you're feeling like things are hard and you might not even know why. You might not even be in a bad place. You're just kind of off. It doesn't have to be that you call for counseling because you're at the end of your rope. It might be that you're calling for counseling because you're just feeling a little off and there's warning signs. You just want to sort out what's off about this. You're not wasting our time. That's what we do every day. Call and ask for help. Call and talk to someone about it. It's a non judgmental person. It's a person who is only about helping you. That's their entire stake in the game, is to help you. You call the number, and I'm sure, John Paul, you'll provide the number in the website, and we can mention it before the end of this session. That program is available to you today. You could get off of this video and immediately call for help of various kinds, and I hope you will. Now, in particular, is a time when we need help getting through this particular period. No reason why you shouldn't avail yourself of that kind of help. You deserve it.
Thank you for such a great overview of the program and some of the issues that students and people in the legal profession are facing. Perhaps maybe we could start. You did bring it up, but there's always been, and it certainly we're a lot better, I think, in 2021 than the early 2000s and the 90s with respect to a lot of lawyers and paralegals and those in the legal profession and in the legal profession kind of associated mental health issues with weakness. Like, how can you represent a client when you are dealing with depression, right? So what can you say to students who may be having that same kind, even though we've emphasized certainly it's confidential and it's free and no one's going to know about it, but how to kind of get away from that feeling that if you're dealing with some of these issues, then how can you go and deal with other people's issues?
Um, there, the, there's really no connection, especially since a lot of people who are really professional and have integrity will push through whatever's going on inside to help the person they need to help. So, for the most part, someone dealing with depression or anxiety will still be intelligent, competent, hardworking, diligent. They're going to do the work that they need to do. It may make it harder for them to do it, but the truth is, it would make it harder for you to help a client if your dog died and you were really sad for a couple of weeks or longer, because that's a profound loss. That's also something that can really affect how your mood and your concentration. But you're still a person who has integrity, who wants to do a good job, and you will bring yourself to that work. Having something like depression or anxiety or substance use issues, that does not disqualify you from being an effective advocate. I can tell you that for a lot of people, having gone through some of these challenges, it makes them a better advocate because they've learned compassion for people going through these kinds of things. They don't just feel like they're impervious to bad things happening, so other people should be too. It teaches them a level of empathy for the struggle. I know people who were family lawyers who, having had difficult lives themselves, were better family lawyers. They brought a level of emotional intelligence to it because they understood human vulnerability. The truth is, people who practice in our profession are human beings. They're not robots. Everyone goes through stuff. every single person who I'm talking to right now has gone through and maybe right now going through very difficult things. I mean, COVID is the easiest thing, right? Do we shut down the legal profession because everyone's having a challenge with COVID? No. People put one foot in front of the other. The challenge is not that you're challenged. The challenge is when you're challenged and you stay alone with it. I know lawyers and I know paralegals who have bouts of depression, keep working, but because they have regular counseling and they have maybe a peer support person or they have a clergy member they check with on a regular basis, it's this support system they have that holds them up. So that, the example I often use is, if you have a good foundation to your house, if you sleep at night and treat sleep with the respect it deserves, that it's important, it's not just a luxury, and if you eat reasonably well, and if you don't abuse substances, and if you have lots of love around you, and if you're kind to yourself, and if you don't overwork yourself, your foundation is good, so that when a gust of wind comes and makes the house waver, the foundation holds it up. So you can be someone who's practicing as a paralegal, doing all the work and having days that are hard. If you have your support system in place, if you're doing some of those fundamental things to keep yourself well, you can keep doing the work. And occasionally, it's okay to say, you know what, I shouldn't keep doing the work right now. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to step away. That's also self care. Sometimes it's important to say, I need to go into 100% healing mode, resting mode, rejuvenation mode. It happens particularly for people who get really, really busy and overwhelmed, but don't like slow it down and get it more at a reasonable level. They just go 100 miles an hour all the time and then they crash because they didn't calibrate it. They didn't get it to a manageable place where they could maintain a healthy life and be a productive person in the profession. So what I invite you to do is, don't let it catch up to you. I don't know. Some of you may have heard, the example of the frog boiling in water. If you drop a frog into warm, tepid water, it won't notice anything. It'll just swim around. And if you slowly turn up the heat on the water, it may not notice that the heat is turning up until it just boils to death. Versus dropping a frog into boiling water, it'll jump right back out because it immediately knows this is not right. A lot of people in the profession, it's a slow boil. Work gets added, more work gets added, more work gets added. They're new to the profession. They don't know that they can say no. They don't know that they can tell their boss, you know what, I'm full. I can't do another thing. I need to catch up on what I've got already, because they want to make a good impression. So they overload themselves and eventually they burn out. As much as you can learn those boundaries to say, I work these hours, I'm not working more than these hours because I need to take care of myself too. I don't, live to work. I work to live. I'm passionate about my work. I like my work, but it's not my everything. It's not who I am. It's what I do. The more you can have those kinds of boundaries, set up that kind of support system, when you have a bout with anxiety, or you start drinking a little bit too much, or you fall into a bit of a depression, your support system holds you up. So you can keep doing that work. They're separate things. You can be really bright and really intelligent and really diligent and work really, really hard and care about your clients, and also be in a terrible mood that day. You can do both. I just want you to have the support you need for the second part, so that it's not just lonely and hopeless.
Now you just touched there on substance abuse, and I don't know if I have the statistics offhand, but I feel I've read plenty of places that those in the legal profession tend to be at the highest levels of substance abuse. What can you offer in terms of making maybe a better choice there, as opposed to using alcohol or drugs or whatever as a coping mechanism for a lot of the stressors that we have, as whether students, whether in our lives, or certainly with our clients in practice?
Mm-hmm.
What can you suggest there?
You framed it perfectly. It's a coping mechanism. There's nothing inherently wrong with a glass of wine. There's nothing inherently wrong with smoking a joint. Like, it's all legal and it's all recreational. There's nothing wrong with a piece of chocolate. But if you're eating 20 chocolate bars a day because it just makes you feel better, that's probably not healthy, and it's going to have a deleterious effect on your health. If you're drinking an entire bottle of wine and you're drinking every day, it's going to have a deleterious effect on your health and on your mood. I mean, alcohol is a chemical depressant. If you're drinking it all the time, you're basically mainlining a depressant into your bloodstream. It's going to have an impact on your mood. So when you say it's coping, it's life is hard. There are challenges all the time, and all of us have them. And we have adaptive, healthy coping mechanisms and maladaptive, unhealthy coping mechanisms. All the abuse of a substance is a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's needing relief, needing ways to help me deal with this challenge, and finding one that seems to work in the short term but has really poor mid to long term effects. So all we're really saying is you need coping. Life can be really hard. We need help with coping. We want to find the adaptive coping mechanisms, the ones that aren't going to hurt us in the process of helping us cope. The most important one is social support. The most important one is having people who care about you and love you in your world, who accept you just as you are, who listen to you without judgment, who are available. It also, by the way, helps to be a support for them too. That feels good too. It's reciprocal sometimes. But that kind of support is a great way to cope because you're not alone. If you're just imagine a person sitting alone with their self-judging thoughts and thinking everyone's going to judge them the same way. So not talking to anyone and they're stewing in their own self-judgment. That hurts. They need relief from that. And if they can't reach out because they're afraid to be judged, they're not going to get relief from that. They're going to look for it elsewhere. I invite you to share with people who are kind, to be in a support system, whether it's family, clergy, counselor, support group, or like I said, a group of similarly situated people who get you. But that social support is important. Making sure that you're sleeping well is important because that also leads to poor coping. You want to shore yourself up the best you can so that you can cope the best you can in the healthiest ways. You want to move your body. One of the things that we're dealing with around COVID is now that the weather's getting better, thank goodness, get out of the house. I was going to say get out of the damn house, but I don't want to be vulgar. But seriously, get out of the house. Get some vitamin D from the sunshine. Go for a walk. Breathe fresh air. Get a change of pace from the screen that you're looking at for hours on end. Interact with people. Sit on a park bench and people watch. That'll perk up your mood. Whatever it is that works for you, read a book. One of my clients put down musical instruments for years and years. He forgot that they were the kind of things that gave them comfort. My encouragement was pick up an instrument. They went and bought a guitar. They started playing again after years. Oh, look, a new coping mechanism. It's healthy. It feeds my soul. So I get relief from that instead of from something that's unhealthy, but seems in the moment to take the edge off of my anxiety or something like that. So people can absolutely manage those things. It's back to the kindness thing. It's not kind to pump your body full of alcohol. It has too many negative impacts. It affects relationships all the time. I can tell you when I do couples counseling and I hear about one person treating the other one really poorly, they may not mention that there's alcohol involved, but by the end of one session, you may find out, oh, and by the way, he drinks. Because it's always in the mix in situations like that. People try to cope by using alcohol and they end up sabotaging their relationships and they end up sabotaging their own relationship with themselves, frankly, because they feel guilty and they feel weak for doing it. So then they drink more because they already feel bad about themselves. It's a very nasty circle. Find the kind coping mechanisms, the one that are nurturing and not self-harming.
I think just touched on this as well with COVID-19, and some of our routines have changed that we're not doing things. And for example, like some people's travel times have been replaced by doing more work, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
have a little bit more time. Even things where you would just be walking from your car to the bus or to the train, or walking
Mm-hmm.
around, and you're seeing your step counts go down because you're just pretty much going from your office to the kitchen and back up. Right. So, what can we do to kind of break out of these COVID induced routines? And I mean, you just mentioned a number of things there as well, but that can make it seem like we're living our previous um, COVID free life,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're in a pandemic and certainly in the midst of a third wave right now. And as you alluded to, in Toronto and Peel, and probably in the surrounding areas,
Mm-hmm.
if not tomorrow or by the end of the week, with the children being back home, what can we do to kind of avoid kind of falling into traps where we are neglecting a lot of our physical and mental well being?
yeah, I mean, what can we do to actually have lives? Because the last year has kind of felt like life just went away and we just trudged along doing our work and coping and worrying. And some of the things I mentioned about, getting out and going for a walk or working out or or get doing Zoom gatherings with friends or family, whatever you can do, um, going to the park. I go with my daughter sometimes or into the backyard. Just because you don't have the routine of taking the subway to work, doing the walk to the office, interacting with people in the office, going to lunch across the street in the food court, coming back. So there's walking involved. There's, as you said, there's steps involved. There's fresh air involved. There's interacting with actual human beings face to face involved. Just because you don't have that routine doesn't mean you can't have routine. In this circumstance, I think you got to create a new routine. And that routine can include small things like when you get up in the morning, don't just stay in your pajamas because, you know, no one's going to see you. No, get dressed anyway. Get yourself feeling like you're putting on the wardrobe of a working person. And even at the end of the working day, you can change into your sweats then. Now I know there's a real thing about how one of the best parts of COVID is that people just wear sweats perpetually. But um, that also can make you feel like you're just kind of a laggard. And you want to feel like you're doing something. You want to feel like you're going to work. And by the way, you also want to feel like you're leaving work, as I mentioned earlier, that when your workday is done and that your routine should include an end to your workday or an end to your study session so that you're now off. When you're on, you're on. I've known people who were unemployed who felt like, I can't take a vacation. My whole life is a vacation. No, it's not. You're not relaxing when you're unemployed. You're agonizing over the fact that you're unemployed. And I had periods in my life earlier on when I didn't have a job for a while and I agonized the whole time. And then I got a job and I thought, God, I just wasted 2 months that I could have actually had some fun, but I was too busy being upset that I didn't have a job. So building routines now, new routines, new ways to spend your day when you wake up at the same time, going to sleep at the same time, even on the weekends. That's good sleep hygiene. That keeps that consistency too. It keeps your circadian rhythms in line, keeps your body in rhythm, and regular interactions with people, and walking. I just saw somebody saying taking a stroll is it motivates them. Absolutely, all those kinds of routines, and sometimes it's a stroll with someone else, so that you're building in a routine of social interaction too. And maybe it's a routine of I watch the same show every week. We watch American Idol as a family. That's routine too. You look forward to it and there's consistency and you feel like you're living a life. You're not just waiting for COVID to be over. That's not a life. There's lots you can be doing. There are some limitations on what you can be doing, but there's still a lot you can do to create a life that has meaning to it, that has purpose to it, that will then get hopefully better when things get better out in the world.
Now, related to that, certainly you mentioned about turning off, and I think that's a problem lawyers and paralegals and students have in particular. Some students, for example, are balancing a full-time job, all of these responsibilities, school, homework, things like that. And then you go into the profession and you have billable hours for lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone was sharing with me that there's someone at their firm that it's at like 1,200 hours already, which, I mean, we're in April. I mean,
Mm.
I think because I practice part-time, I think I don't have even 700
Yeah,
over the course of the year,
yeah.
but just this constant drive to do, and taking a break and is seen again as well, you're not strong enough or you're not effective enough for our firm. How do you just turn off and not worry about all of these other things related to that?
I would start with, why are you doing it? Whose career is it anyway? If you're working at a place which requires you to do 12, 14 hours a day, is that the life you signed up for? Is that the life you want? Because it is your life and your career, and you get to construct it the way you want to, with the limitations of what's available out in the world. And maybe that doesn't happen for you straight out of school. Maybe it takes a while for you to move in the direction of something that fits you best. But this is your career. It includes working in environments you want to work in, working in the kind of law you want to work in. It also includes potentially not working in law at all if you don't want to. I mean, goodness knows I got out of law, and some people are thriving in law. It's your thing. So if you're finding yourself with the inability to turn off because the workplace that you work in demands that you just don't, and your own insecurity being new makes you feel like I need to do more, I need to do more, I haven't done enough yet, you're going to burn out anyway. That's no, we're not robots, right? So first you got to decide what you want your career to look like. What's important to you? What kind of work you want to do? What kind of people you want to work with? How much you want to do? And what else in your life you want? What other activities are you passionate about? What other things do you want to spend time on? And then when you're constructing your career, work in workplaces that comport with what your goals are. So if my goal is I want to work maximum 9, 10 hours a day at work, and then I want to have a life outside of work, then you work in workplaces that align with that. If you're working in a workplace that expects a lot more, you're choosing to work there. They're going to make the demands that they're going to make. And there may be people there who are perfectly fine with it. So my invitation to you is to feel the power to construct a career based on your values, what you want to do, how you want to do it, and to choose places to work that align with that. And also to allow yourself to have those boundaries. A lot of people don't have boundaries because they don't like disappointing people. They don't like saying no to anyone. Early in their careers, they think if they say no, it will sabotage the trajectory of their career because they're going to have a reputation as someone who's not on call at all times. I don't recommend you being on call at all times. I don't recommend you being available to at 3 a.m. for a call if that's not an inherent part of your job, or on the weekend because you don't get to have weekends. Unless you're the kind of person who wants that, who really likes the idea of working all those hours and all that, that's actually really awful for a person because they never get to have that rejuvenation time, the time to have other parts of their lives. So saying no is basically, boundaries are basically just teaching people how to treat us, what their expectations are. When you're going to work with clients in your practice, the first time you ever meet them, you're going to set boundaries day one. You're going to say, I'm going to bill you this much. I'm going to charge you when I talk to you. So you better, you better, not just call me all the time because my time is what I bill. And here's what I recommend for your matter, and here's the outcome I expect. Here are what your expectations should be about how this is going to go. Here's what the process is going to look like. This is when I'm available to talk to. This is when I'm not available and I'm off the grid. You're setting these boundaries all the time. And the sooner you set them, not only with clients, but with the people you work for, when you go on job interviews, don't just be interviewed, interview them. Now, easy for me to say, in a world where you've got debt and you need a job and you got rent to pay, maybe you feel like I can't afford to do that. I get it. I'm not pie in the sky here. But what you want to do is have in your mind that you get to the point in your career where you get to construct it your way. And that includes, what are the hours I want to work? And by the way, you said when you started talking, John Paul, you said turning off. And the first thing that popped into my head was turning off social media, turning off TV news. That was the thing that came to my mind because so much of that is just information overload that adds to the information overload at work. We recommend people go on news diets and social media diets. That doom scrolling thing on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram will just drag you down. It'll drag you down because there's maybe bad news. It'll also drag you down because everyone looks so happy. Everyone has such great vacations, or at least in the before times they did. Everyone's children are just the smartest and the most beautiful ever. So, not having this artificial world that's virtual, go talk to an actual human being. Talk to them about stuff, share stuff, talk about, nothing. The idea being, think about what your inputs are and what your outputs are. What are you taking in? Is it overloading you? Do you need to calibrate it? Do you need to make it more reasonable so that you can be well in that process? And you do have some measure of control over that if you let yourself.
Now, in terms of, certainly you mentioned about, we don't necessarily have the choice, especially students getting into the profession, right? So with that anxiety, especially now in a pandemic, throwing this whole thing into like a flame here and an
Hmm.
explosion on top of it, right? Is
Yeah.
what can you do? Because you're not at that point where you can be a little bit more selective of
Hmm.
getting into the what are the things you can do to kind of better have, and certainly having friends, family, you mentioned the clergy, support systems in place, but what else can you do to kind of alleviate those inevitable challenges that you're going to face by just getting into this profession?
So I'll start at the very baseline, at the lowest hanging fruit, which is even though you really need a job, and I've talked to a lot of paralegals over the years that have this fear of, yeah, paralegal school will be over, but then where does the job come from? And I got to make a living. I'm going to school so I can have a career, and I'm nervous about if I'm going to find a job. It's a real issue. We have real bills to pay, and some of us have bills to pay not only for ourselves but for our kids and for our partners and everything else. So it's real. That said, taking a job that's going to beat you down is ultimately going to be counterproductive to your ultimate goal. So the low hanging fruit is don't take places that are going to work you till you're a pulp. Don't take places where they treat people badly, even if you need a job, because you're probably not going to last long there anyway, because it's going to wear you out. So you have to have at least some baseline of requirements in terms of the kind of place you're going to work at, the kind of things that you're willing to tolerate or not. So maybe you're taking a place that's going to have long hours, but you're willing to pay your dues early in your career. Okay, that you signed up for that, you did it on purpose. Okay, so then you also need your support system that is not only social, but like I said, we have a peer support program. It can help to have a peer volunteer who's a paralegal who you can just debrief with sometimes, who you can just share how hard it is and what are some of the things that you do to get through. And boy, I really didn't like the way that guy talked to me the other day, or opposing counsel was really intimidating and it was hard because I've never dealt with that before. Having someone to talk to about it just demystifies it. It lets the air out of the balloon a little bit. That can be really helpful too. And like I said, those kinds of also professional organizations where you can feel like you're part of something and you're not alone with it. And I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but you need other parts of your life to make that part tolerable. So if the work part is hard, but you've had to take the job because you had to take the job, and hopefully it gets better over time, you need those other things to be shoring you up, the support, the social support, the passion. If you write, don't stop writing just because you've got this job. If you play music, don't stop playing music. If you like to work out, don't stop working out. Carve that time out. It's really important to do all those other things that attend, like basically you're a biological organism, and a biological organism needs to be fed and watered in every part of them, not just the work part. The sleep needs to be happening, the social support needs to be happening, the love needs to be happening, the physical activity needs to be happening, the family engagement needs to be happening, the intellectual pursuits outside of work needs to be happening. All of it needs to be happening. If you attend to the various parts of you, then even if work is really hard, it is juxtaposed against all those other parts of you that you're also taking care of. It's that foundation. It's holding you up, even though early career can be really challenging.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us here today. It's always a pleasure talking to you. It's very informative knowing what resources are out there. And certainly it is a very challenging time. And again, 13 months or so ago, I mean, at least in my case, I could say I thought doing 2 weeks, it's a little reset here. And, in April, we'll be back and we'll have remembered this time. And here we are, April 2021, and we're into a third wave. And again, certainly there's light at the end of the tunnel, but just when we see that light, then we hear of, okay, well, we got to step back and do a emergency break, or
Right.
the vaccines are slowly rolling out. And then, as you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, then there's variants. And so we don't know exactly when we'll be over through this. And certainly
But
there's
there,
going to
there,
be.
there looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel of some sort. So it's not endless anymore. If I told you, you just woke up this morning and it turns out the vaccine thing was a dream, and there actually aren't any vaccines in the offing, they're still working on them. That would be a lot harder to deal with than knowing they're out there, but they're slowly rolling out, but they are out there. Knowing that actually helps. The light at the end of the tunnel part helps because I can maybe last another 3 or 4 months of this, as long as I know at that point maybe I'll actually be able to have a more normal life again. That gives me solace and the ability to push through this part. And I want to make sure. I'm assuming, John Paul, you're going to put the member assistance program information on the YouTube
Yeah,
page or
but
somewhere
the
where they can.
link and the phone numbers. Anything else maybe
Beautiful.
that I can put out there that I think that's
Just the
probably good.
website, myassistplan.com, and the phone number is good enough.
Perfect. Now, Doran, if any final words of advice for everyone dealing through this time, and certainly, like you just said, that it looks like we have a real end goal here. I'm thinking by the end of the summer, when school goes back in September, that we'll have a semblance of normal. But getting through these next few months, and certainly there'll be lasting effects
Mhm.
of this. And for those entering into the profession, as you mentioned, there are things before the
Yeah,
pandemic, and this just made things, exacerbated, right? But what can you
absolutely.
share for students getting into the profession, and maybe some of those who are already in the profession of succeeding and taking care of their mental health?
The simplest things are a couple things I've mentioned already. Be yourself without apology. Don't be who you think other people need you to be. Don't be who your parents say you're supposed to be, or do what your parents say you're supposed to do. They won't like that I said that, but you're a grown up now. You get to do your thing now. And so, without apology, be yourself. Go, follow your passions. Do what you want to do. There is no right way to do law. There's only your way. Do it your way. Don't fit yourself into the law. Fit the law into you. Make the law be something that you do because you want to do it and you want to do it the way you want to do it. And in that process, the second thing I'll say is what I said before: be kind. Law feels like a tough as nails, social Darwinistic, survival of the fittest thing. No, no. Human beings populate law, and human beings are vulnerable and strong, and sometimes, you know, have challenges and sometimes really flourish. We go through these ups and downs all the time. Be kind to yourself through all of it. And by the way, be kind to the people around you through all of it too, in particular during this period of time, because everyone is really struggling. Everyone around the world. I mean, it's an international phenomenon. So there's a lot of struggle out there. A lot of us are, short tempered and impatient with people. Remind yourself to look at the world and look at yourself through a lens of kindness. I'm a good person. I'm doing the best I can in difficult circumstances, and I deserve the kindness. I wish you all a lot of luck. Thanks for
Thanks
having me.
again. Take care.
Be well.
Thank you so much, Doran. Have a great day.
Thank you.